September 12, 1944. East Ridge, overlooking Peleliu's airfield. Captain Gregory Mad Greg Boyington, 31, from Kerr, Deline, Idaho, pushed his F4U Corsair into a dive that made his wingman question his sanity. His hands stayed steady on the stick despite the airframe, shuddering at 380 miles per hour. Below, 40 limestone cave entrances dotted the ridge face, like dark eyes watching the Marines, pinned on the coral beach. Each cave held Japanese defenders who'd turned natural formations into interlocking fortresses. The morning sun baked the cockpit to 110 degrees, but Boyington barely noticed. He'd spotted something the planners missed, a pattern in how the caves connected. What Boyington didn't know, within 96 hours, his improvised technique would become doctrine across the Pacific. The method would clear more enemy positions in 2 minutes than conventional bombardment managed in 2 days. 3 days earlier, intelligence predicted the island would fall in 4 days. Marines landed expecting another Tarawa, brutal but brief. Instead, they found Colonel Kunio Nakagawa had transformed Peleliu into something unprecedented. The Japanese commander ignored Tokyo's directive for beach defense. He'd studied Tarawa's failure and concluded differently. His 10,000 troops occupied 500 cave positions across limestone ridges that rose 300 feet above the airfield. Traditional naval bombardment bounced off the rock like thrown pebbles. By dawn on September 12th, the 1st Marine Division had suffered 100 casualties. They'd advanced 800 yards in 3 days. Battalion commanders reported the same problem. Caves. Marines would suppress one position with rifle fire, advance 50 yards, then take fire from 3 more openings they hadn't spotted. Flamethrower teams got within 30 yards before sniper fire from adjacent caves cut them down. Artillery couldn't reach the reverse slopes where most entrances hid. Could conventional tactics crack this defense? Division intelligence estimated 6 weeks minimum. Colonel Louis Chesty Pullers, 1st Marines, held the northern flank where the ridges began. His after-action reports documented the arithmetic of failure. Each cave required a 10-man assault team. Each team needed 30 minutes to approach under covering fire, another 20 to deploy flamethrowers or explosives. 30 caves per day consumed 300 men in constant rotation. The Japanese simply waited in deeper chambers until Marines moved forward, then reoccupied fighting positions. Engineers tried drilling holes for explosive charges. The coral limestone dulled bits after 3 feet. They switched to shaped charges against cave mouths. Detonations collapsed the first 15 feet of tunnel, but the Japanese excavated around the rubble within hours and resumed firing. Rear Admiral Jesse Oldendorf suggested another naval bombardment. His battleships had already fired 1,860 tons of shells at the ridges before the landing. Post-strike reconnaissance showed most caves remained operational. The numbers seemed impossible. 40 operational caves per ridge segment, 5 segments across the airfield approach. But 1st Marine Division logs confirmed every detail. Marine Corsairs had been flying close air support since D-Day, dropping 500-pound bombs on suspected positions. Boyington watched the results from 8,000 feet. Bombs either overshot into the jungle or exploded against cliff faces without penetrating. The blast radius didn't reach inside the limestone. He'd flown 32 combat missions before Peleliu, mostly fighter sweeps against Japanese airfields. This was different. The enemy wasn't in the open where you could strafe them into submission. On September 11, Boyington attended the daily strike briefing aboard USS Essex. Commander Air Group outlined the next day's targets. Same ridge segments, same bomb loads. A Marine liaison officer, Major Robert Ashe from the 5th Marines, interrupted with casualty reports. His battalion had lost 43 men trying to take 100 yards of ridge base. They'd knocked out 6 cave positions. Intelligence counted 34 more, still firing. Boyington asked about ordnance options beyond standard bombs. The munitions officer mentioned napalm, jellied gasoline in drop tanks, originally developed for the fire raids over Europe and testing in island campaigns. They had it aboard, but nobody had figured how to make it work against fortified positions. Napalm burned for 7 seconds after impact. Caves had too much depth for surface fire to matter. That's when Boyington's engineering background, 2 years at the University of Washington before dropping out to join the Flying Tigers, connected 3 pieces of information. Caves needed air circulation or defenders suffocated. The interconnected tunnels that made Peleliu's defenses so effective also created something else: draft. And napalm, unlike high explosives, didn't need to physically reach its target to kill. He proposed a test run the next morning. Drop the napalm tanks just inside the cave mouths, at minimum safe altitude, 50 feet above the ridge. Let the burning gel get sucked into the tunnel system by the natural airflow. The jellied gasoline would consume available oxygen while producing carbon monoxide. Defenders deeper in the complex would have 2 choices: evacuate or suffocate. Major Ash listened without interrupting. How many passes would this take per cave? 2, Boyington said. Maybe 3 if the entrance is narrow. 2 minutes total. The Marine liaison did the math out loud. 40 caves at 2 minutes each meant 80 minutes of flight time, instead of the 6-hour bombardment currently planned. He asked the obvious question: could anyone fly that low, that slow, into rifle fire from positions they couldn't see? Boyington didn't hesitate. I can. Gregory Boyington had survived impossible situations through methodical calculation wrapped in apparent recklessness. Born in 1912, he'd bounced between engineering studies and barnstorming before finding his calling with the American Volunteer Group in China. The Flying Tigers taught him something conventional. Navy training didn't emphasize improvisation under constraints. Chinese airfields lacked proper ordnance, so pilots learned to maximize whatever worked. Back in Marine service by 1943, he'd already earned the Medal of Honor and 12 confirmed kills. Fellow pilots called him Mad Greg, less for his tactics and more for his willingness to test theories, others dismissed as suicidal. What Ash didn't know: Boyington had been studying cave warfare since Tarawa. His personal notebooks contained sketches of tunnel systems and airflow calculations. The F4U Corsair was never designed for what Boyington proposed. Vought built it as a high-altitude interceptor. The bent-wing design and 2,000-horsepower Pratt & Whitney engine excelled at 25,000 feet, where Japanese Zeros struggled. The aircraft could hit 417 miles per hour in level flight, faster than any carrier fighter in the Pacific. But speed and altitude meant nothing against Peleliu's static defenses. Boyington's innovation required reversing the Corsair's advantages. Instead of altitude, he needed to operate at deck level where cave mouths became visible. Instead of speed, he needed to slow to 180 miles per hour, barely above stall speed, for accurate drops. The bent wing that provided high-altitude stability became a liability near the ground, where turbulence off the ridges created unpredictable lift. The napalm delivery system itself was crude. Standard 150-gallon drop tanks filled with gasoline, thickened with aluminum soap compounds. No sophisticated release mechanism, just the same manual toggle pilots used for external fuel tanks. Drop too early, and the tank fell short. Drop too late, and it bounced deeper into the cave than intended, wasting the burn outside the tunnel complex. 3 factors made Boyington's approach viable where conventional bombing failed. First, accuracy mattered more than explosive force. A bomb needed direct hits to damage limestone. Napalm only needed proximity to an entrance. Second, the jellied fuel clung to whatever it touched and burned at 1,800 degrees for 7 to 10 seconds. Inside the confined space of a tunnel, that heat exhausted available oxygen within 15 seconds. Third, the interconnected cave system that made defense so effective became a vulnerability. One entrance treated with napalm could render 3 or 4 connected positions untenable through smoke and carbon monoxide spread. Before Boyington's technique, the standard approach to fortified positions followed doctrine developed in the Solomon Islands. Step 1. naval bombardment to suppress firing. Step 2, close air support with 500-pound bombs. Step 3, ground assault with flamethrowers and explosive charges. Each step was sequential. Failure at any stage meant starting over. The process consumed hours per position. Boyington compressed all 3 steps into one continuous action lasting 120 seconds. The Corsair approached from the ocean side, where the ridge blocked defensive fire until the last moment. At 200 feet altitude, he rolled into a 40-degree dive that brought him perpendicular to the cave mouth at 50 feet, released the napalm tank at 180 miles per hour from 40 feet distance. Pull up immediately while the tank tumbled through the cave entrance. The tumbling motion, which pilots usually tried to prevent, actually helped distribute burning gel across the opening. Traditional bombing required being directly over the target. Boyington's angle of attack meant he was never above the cave, never in the primary firing lane. By the time Japanese defenders acquired his aircraft, he'd already released and begun his pull-up. The whole attack profile exposed him for 6 seconds. Commander Air Group initially rejected the proposal. Too low, too slow, too exposed. Lieutenant Colonel Frank Walton, Boyington's squadron commander, supported the concept but questioned the execution. The minimum safe altitude for close air support was 1,500 feet, enough distance to avoid ground fire and give pilots reaction time if something went wrong. Boyington wanted to operate at 50 feet with zero margin for error. The debate centered on acceptable risk versus potential gain. Fleet aviation doctrine, developed after too many pilots died testing untried tactics, mandated extensive simulation before combat trials. Peleliu offered no time for gradual testing. Marines were dying at a rate that would exhaust the division's effective strength within 2 weeks. Major Ash, present at the second planning session, shifted the argument. He didn't ask whether Boyington's approach was safe. He asked whether it was safer than continuing the current stalemate. His battalion had attempted another cave assault that morning. 17 casualties, 3 positions cleared, estimated 31 remaining. At that rate, his unit would cease to exist as a fighting force before the ridges fell. Boyington framed it differently. Give me 6 aircraft and 1 hour. If it doesn't work, you've lost 1 hour. If it works, you've saved 6 weeks. September 12th dawned clear with light winds from the southeast. Ideal conditions for flight operations, but terrible for ground troops baking in exposed positions. Boyington briefed his 5 wingmen at 0530 aboard Essex. The mission called for attacking a ridge segment designated Point Zebra by 1st Marines. Intelligence counted 14 cave entrances in a 200-yard stretch. Marine forward observers would mark targets with colored smoke, white for confirmed enemy positions, yellow for suspected. The technical challenge went beyond flying low and slow. Each Corsair carried 2 napalm tanks plus full ammunition. The added weight reduced maneuverability and pushed the aircraft closer to stall speed. Pilots would need to maintain precise airspeed while diving at steep angles 50 feet above terrain. One miscalculation meant flying into the ridge face at 180 miles per hour. Boyington established the attack sequence. He'd make the first pass to demonstrate technique. Each subsequent pilot would attack a different cave mouth, proceeding north to south along the ridge. Marine artillery would cease fire 30 seconds before the first pass and resume 60 seconds after the last aircraft cleared. The narrow timing window minimized risk to the Corsairs while keeping pressure on other Japanese positions. The Corsairs launched at 06 team, formed up at 5,000 feet, then descended toward Peleliu in a loose echelon. Boyington could see Point Zebra clearly, a limestone outcrop rising 250 feet above the coastal shelf, pockmarked with cave openings. White smoke markers drifted from 3 positions where Marines had confirmed enemy activity that morning. He pushed the stick forward and dropped the formation to 500 feet, then 200. At 180 miles per hour, the ridge face filled his windscreen. The first cave mouth appeared as a dark oval 30 feet wide, 12 feet high. Japanese positions had been firing at Marine positions below all morning, but they held fire as Boyington approached, probably confused by an aircraft coming from an unexpected angle. He rolled into his dive at 40 degrees, centered the cave in his reflector sight, and toggled the first napalm tank at 52 feet altitude. The 150-gallon tank tumbled end over end, struck the cave lip, and detonated in an orange-white fireball that filled the entrance. Boyington pulled up hard, felt the G-forces compress his spine, and climbed back to 500 feet. Below, flames boiled out of the cave mouth for 8 seconds. Black smoke followed, pouring from 3 separate openings, 40 feet apart, confirmation that the tunnels connected exactly as he'd predicted. Could the defenders survive that inferno? The answer came within 60 seconds. Marine forward observer Lieutenant Paul Hayes, positioned 300 yards south with binoculars, radioed the result. No fire from the treated cave or its 2 connected positions. Adjacent caves continued shooting, but 3 positions had gone silent. Hayes requested Boyington hit the next cluster, 5 entrances in a 50-yard stretch. Boyington's second pass targeted a smaller opening partially concealed by vegetation. This time, Japanese defenders saw him coming. Rifle fire sparkled from positions above and below the target cave. He maintained course, released at 48 feet, and felt rounds punch through the Corsair's tail section as he pulled up. The napalm detonated perfectly, but enemy fire intensified from caves he hadn't treated yet. His third pass drew heavier resistance. A Japanese heavy machine gun, probably a Type 92, opened up from a cave 100 feet north of his target. Tracer rounds walked across his flight path. Boyington jinked left, dropped his second tank slightly off target. It tumbled into brush 15 feet from the cave mouth and broke hard right. The napalm ignited vegetation that burned toward the entrance, but without the concentration needed to penetrate deep. What Hayes observed revealed a problem. The partially successful strike suppressed the cave for perhaps 90 seconds. Then defenders resumed firing. Boyington had theorized that even a near miss would drive Japanese troops deeper into their tunnels. Reality proved more complex. Near misses created temporary disruption, not elimination. Lieutenant Michael Chen, Boyington's wingman from San Francisco, attacked next. He'd flown 30 missions over Rabaul, knew how to maintain course under fire. His first pass hit dead center. Napalm tank disappeared into a cave mouth and detonated inside. The blast wave carried burning gel 60 feet into the tunnel. Chen's second pass targeted a position that had been firing steadily at Marine lines all morning. The tank struck high, fragmenting against the cave ceiling, but burning gel rained down across the entrance. Secondary explosions followed, probably ammunition cooking off in the heat. The pattern emerged across 6 aircraft and 12 passes. Direct hits into cave mouths achieved the desired effect, fires that consumed oxygen and produced deadly carbon monoxide throughout connected tunnels. Near misses created temporary disruption, but not permanent suppression. The difference came down to precision. Hitting a target 30 feet wide from a diving aircraft traveling 180 miles per hour at 50 feet altitude while under fire. 3 of the 14 caves received direct hits. All 3 fell silent and remained silent. 4 received near misses that disrupted but didn't eliminate the defenders. 7 went untreated because pilots broke off their attacks when ground fire became too intense. The hour-long strike achieved mixed results. 3 definite kills, 4 probable suppressions, 7 unchanged. Major Ash radioed his assessment from the ground. The 3 you hit direct are done. My men just walked up to 1 cave. Bodies inside, no resistance. The others are still fighting. Boyington returned to Essex, understanding the technique worked in principle, but needed refinement. The after-action briefing focused on 3 problems. First, accuracy under fire. Pilots instinctively broke off attacks when tracers got close, leading to hasty drops that missed the precise aim point. Second, target identification. Several cave mouths were partially concealed by vegetation or positioned at angles that made them invisible until the last second. Third, The 2-minute attack window, per cave, assumed no opposition, but Japanese defenders concentrated fire on aircraft once they recognized the attack pattern. That afternoon, Boyington proposed modifications. Instead of solo passes, pairs of aircraft would attack simultaneously. Lead aircraft would approach from the standard dive angle, while the wingman came in from the opposite direction at level altitude. The split approach forced defenders to choose which aircraft to engage. While they shot at one, the other made its drop. Additionally, pairs would attack the same cave, 2 tanks instead of 1, doubling the volume of napalm and ensuring deeper penetration. Fleet Operations Officer approved a second trial the next morning with revised tactics. September 13th brought worse conditions, low clouds at 800 feet and gusty winds that made precision flying harder. Boyington selected a different ridge segment with 12 identified caves. This time, he paired his 6 Corsairs into 3 teams. The first pair, Boyington and Chen, demonstrated the split approach. Chen dove from the north, while Boyington came in level from the south. Japanese machine gun fire tracked Chen's aircraft. Boyington released unmolested, his tank tumbling perfectly into the target cave. 3 seconds later, Chen's tank followed. Both detonated nearly simultaneously, creating a napalm concentration that filled the cave and blasted back out the entrance. 4 connected positions fell silent. The second pair attacked a position that had been particularly troublesome for Marines, a cave cluster 180 feet up the ridge face. Lieutenant James Wilson, 24, from Portland, dove while his wingman, Ensign Robert Martinez from El Paso, approached level. Martinez took heavy fire, his Corsair trailing smoke from hit cooling lines, but he held course and released. Wilson's tank hit the cave mouth. Martinez's tank struck 30 feet below and bounced up into the opening. The combined effect devastated the position. How many caves could this improved technique clear in a day? The answer would reshape Marine tactics for the remaining campaign. The third pair targeted a cave where intelligence reported a Japanese company command post, roughly 180 men in a complex with multiple entrances. This represented the upper limit of what napalm could achieve. Lieutenant David Park, 29, from Seattle, coordinated simultaneous drops on the 2 largest openings. Both tanks hit their marks. Fire erupted from 5 separate exits as burning gel spread through interconnected tunnels. Marine ground observers reported unusual results from this strike. Over the next 10 minutes, 23 Japanese soldiers emerged from exits spread across a 100-yard stretch, hands raised in surrender. Unprecedented behavior on Peleliu, where defenders fought to death. Captured documents later revealed the command staff suffocated when napalm consumed oxygen in their planning chamber. Survivors evacuated before carbon monoxide reached lethal concentration. September 13's strike cleared 11 of 12 targeted caves using 24 napalm tanks across 90 minutes of flight time. The technique's effectiveness jumped from 21% direct hits to 92%. The split approach tactic reduced pilot exposure to defensive fire from 6 seconds to 4, enough to lower casualties while maintaining accuracy. By evening, 1st Marines reported their first significant advance in 4 days. Companies that had been pinned down since D-Day moved forward 300 yards with minimal casualties. The ridge segment treated that morning remained silent, no fire from previously active positions. Colonel Puller requested expanded strikes for September 14. Instead of 12 caves, his operations officer identified 43 positions requiring treatment across a half-mile stretch. That scale demanded more aircraft than Boyington's 6 Corsairs. Commander Air Group allocated 18 aircraft, 3 full divisions rotating through the target area. Weather on September 14th deteriorated. Rain squalls reduced visibility to a quarter mile, and cloud ceiling dropped to 500 feet. Conventional bombing was impossible. Pilots couldn't acquire targets through the weather, but Boyington's low-altitude approach worked in clouds. His aircraft operated below the ceiling, where visual contact with ridge faces remained possible. The expanded strike revealed logistical challenges. 18 aircraft required coordination to prevent mid-air collisions in the confined space between clouds and terrain. Boyington established a rotation system. 2 pairs attacked, while 2 pairs repositioned, creating continuous pressure without congestion. Each pair had 90 seconds over target before the next pair arrived. Attacks proceeded methodically through morning rain. 2 caves per pair, 2 tanks per cave, 4 to 6 minutes per complete cycle. By 1100 hours, they'd treated 38 of 43 targeted positions. The remaining 5 were inaccessible due to terrain that blocked safe approach angles. Results exceeded tactical predictions. Marine battalions advanced 1,000 yards that afternoon, with 72 casualties, compared to 300 casualties for a 200-yard advance 4 days earlier. The treated ridges fell silent. Japanese defenders either died inside collapsed tunnels, evacuated to secondary positions, or surrendered when smoke made their positions untenable. Lieutenant Chen detected the problem first during a strike on September 15th. His Corsair was lined up on a cave 210 feet above the beach when muzzle flashes erupted from an opening 60 feet higher, a position not marked on intelligence maps. The machine gun rounds stitched across his wing route, severing hydraulic lines. He dumped his napalm tanks early and struggled back to Essex with manual controls. Ground crews counted 43 holes in his aircraft. The incident revealed Japanese adaptation. Nakagawa's forces had spent 5 days observing the napalm attacks. They identified the pattern. Corsairs approached from predictable angles, focused on known positions, and exposed themselves during the 4 to 6 seconds needed for accurate drops. Japanese commanders redeployed machine gun teams to concealed positions above and below the treated caves. These overwatch positions waited until aircraft committed to their attack runs, then opened fire when pilots had no maneuvering room. Major Ash's forward observers documented the new defensive arrangement. For every cave marked on maps, the Japanese had positioned at least one supporting weapon in an unmarked location. The supporting positions didn't engage Marine ground forces. They stayed silent, waiting for aircraft. This discipline made them nearly impossible to identify before they fired. Boyington faced a tactical evolution that threatened to negate his advantage. The napalm technique still worked against the caves themselves, but getting into position to deliver the tanks had become substantially more dangerous. On September 16th, 2 Corsairs took damage severe enough to force emergency landings. One pilot, Ensign Thomas Wright from Dallas, ditched in the ocean after his engine seized. He survived, but the loss rate was climbing toward unsustainable levels. That evening aboard Essex, Boyington studied reconnaissance photos under magnification. The overwatch positions were visible once you knew what to look for. Darker shadows at odd angles, vegetation cleared in specific patterns to provide firing lanes. He counted at least 60 such positions across the ridges still under Japanese control. Each one threatened any aircraft that came within 400 yards. Could his technique adapt faster than Japanese defenses? The answer would determine whether napalm remained viable. Boyington proposed a counter-adaptation. Before attacking caves, suppress the overwatch positions with strafing runs. The Corsair's 650 caliber machine guns could deliver 600 rounds in a 3-second burst, enough firepower to neutralize or suppress defensive positions. The challenge was identifying where to shoot. Overwatch positions revealed themselves only when they fired, which meant aircraft needed to draw fire intentionally. Lieutenant Wilson volunteered for the first trial. On September 17th, he flew a deliberate pattern above a ridge segment at 300 feet, higher and slower than normal attack profiles. Japanese machine guns opened up from 3 positions. Wilson marked their locations mentally, broke off, and climbed to 1,000 feet. 3 Corsairs followed, diving on the marked positions with sustained machine gun fire. Then Boyington and Chen attacked the caves themselves, while overwatch positions stayed silent. The suppress then attack sequence added 4 minutes to each strike, but reduced aircraft damage dramatically. Over 3 days, Boyington's division flew 42 sorties against 28 cave complexes. 0 aircraft sustained major damage. The Japanese lost not only cave positions, but also their overwatch defensive network. Crews either died under strafing fire or abandoned positions when they realized staying meant getting killed without accomplishing anything. By September 20th, the tactical balance had shifted. Japanese commanders faced impossible choices: keep overwatch positions manned and watch them get destroyed, or abandon them and let napalm strikes proceed unopposed. Either option meant losing the cave network that formed the core of Peleliu's defense. Dawn brought heavy rain that reduced visibility to 500 yards. Marine battalions attacking the Umerbragal Ridges, the most heavily fortified terrain on Peleliu, reported 16 caves blocking their advance. Normal procedures would wait for weather to clear before calling air support. Boyington launched anyway. The Corsairs descended through cloud layers until they broke into clear air at 200 feet. Rain and limited visibility that grounded conventional bombing actually helped the napalm attacks. Japanese defenders couldn't see aircraft approaching until the last moment. First target was a cave complex, designated Wildcat Bowl, by Marines, a circular depression 400 feet across, where 7 caves provided interlocking fire. Intelligence estimated 200 defenders. Traditional assault would cost 50 to 70 casualties. Boyington coordinated 6 pairs of Corsairs, attacking simultaneously from different directions. 12 napalm tanks hit within 90 seconds. Fire filled the bowl, consuming oxygen faster than the interconnected tunnel system could replenish it. Marines advancing 30 minutes later found 143 Japanese soldiers dead from suffocation and carbon monoxide poisoning. 0 Marine casualties. The Wildcat Bowl strike demonstrated napalm's effectiveness against massed defensive positions, but it also revealed limitations. 3 caves on the northern rim had entrances facing away from attackable angles. No matter which direction Corsairs approached, the terrain blocked clean attack runs. These positions continued firing after the main complex fell silent. How long could bypassed positions hold out once surrounding caves were neutralized? Marine engineers answered by sealing the entrances with bulldozers and explosives. Defenders inside had 3 choices: evacuate through secondary exits and get shot, stay inside without supplies, and suffocate when their ventilation failed, or attempt breakouts that invariably ended in death. Most chose suffocation. Marine patrols, finding bodies inside, sealed caves weeks later. September 21st marked the campaign's turning point. The 1st Marines, which had been stalled for 12 days, broke through to the eastern coast. The breakthrough came directly after. Boyington's division cleared 31 caves in a 6-hour period. Napalm attacks had become so routine that ground commanders now planned advances around strike schedules rather than hoping for air support when convenient. At 14:30 hours, Boyington received an urgent request from the 5th Marines. A reinforced Japanese company had counterattacked from caves overlooking the airfield, threatening to overrun an artillery position. 6 105mm howitzers were in danger of capture. Marine infantry was pinned down 200 yards from the cave entrances. Conventional close air support would risk hitting friendly forces. Boyington briefed 4 pilots for immediate launch. The situation demanded precision beyond what they'd achieved before. Drop napalm tanks within 50 yards of Marine positions while under fire from multiple directions. No room for error. His Corsair launched 8 minutes after receiving the request. Over the target area, Boyington spotted green smoke marking friendly positions. White smoke marked the Japanese caves, only 180 feet away. Marines and Japanese were close enough to throw grenades at each other. He lined up on the northernmost cave, dove to 30 feet, lower than he'd flown on any previous strike, and released at the last possible second. The napalm tank disappeared into the cave entrance. 3 seconds later, fire erupted back out. His wingmen followed, each attacking a separate cave in the cluster. 4 tanks, 4 caves, all within 200 yards of Marine lines. None of the drops threatened friendly forces. The Japanese counterattack collapsed within 5 minutes. Marines retook their positions and held them through nightfall. Night brought a different challenge. Japanese forces traditionally used darkness to infiltrate, resupply, and reposition. Marine commanders wanted to maintain pressure after sunset, but carrier aircraft didn't operate at night, too dangerous without visual references. Boyington proposed a limited trial. If Marines marked targets with tracer fire, could Corsairs deliver napalm by following the tracers? At 21 and 45 hours, 3 Corsairs launched from Essex under a half-moon. Marine forward observers marked 4 cave entrances with sustained tracer fire. Red lines pointing directly at the targets. Boyington descended to 100 feet, followed the tracers to their point of convergence, and released. The napalm explosion lit up the ridge face. His wingmen followed. All 3 strikes hit their marks. The night attacks proved viable but dangerous. Without daylight, pilots couldn't see terrain features or defensive positions until too late. Lieutenant Martinez nearly flew into a ridge spur he didn't see until his Corsair was 30 feet away. The night missions achieved their tactical goals, preventing Japanese resupply and reinforcement, but at risk levels that made them unsuitable for routine operations. During September 12-30, 1944, Boyington's division flew 284 napalm sorties against 167 cave positions. They achieved direct hits on 153 targets, a 91.6% success rate. This compared to conventional bombing's 23% effectiveness against similar fortifications. The napalm technique reduced average cave clearance time from 6 hours to 11 minutes. What the numbers seemed impossible to capture. Entire battalions that would have been destroyed survived because caves fell silent. The first Marines suffered 1,749 casualties taking Peleliu's ridges, brutal but survivable. Without napalm, post-war analysis estimated casualties would have exceeded 4,500, forcing withdrawal or reinforcement that would have disrupted the broader Pacific Campaign timeline. Boyington's tactical innovation created cascading effects. At the immediate level, it broke the stalemate on Peleliu and allowed the island's capture by late November rather than the estimated March 1945. Operationally, it demonstrated that fortified cave positions, previously considered nearly invulnerable, could be neutralized with adapted weapons and tactics. This knowledge influenced planning for Iwo Jima and Okinawa, where Marine commanders anticipated similar defenses and prepared napalm stockpiles before landing. Strategically, the cave-clearing technique altered Japanese defensive doctrine. After Peleliu, commanders recognized that static cave defense was vulnerable to napalm attacks. This contributed to the tactical shift toward defense in depth seen at Iwo Jima. Fewer fixed positions, more mobile defense. The shift actually made subsequent battles harder for American forces, but it also dispersed Japanese strength and prevented the concentrated resistance that nearly succeeded on Peleliu. The technique's influence extended beyond the Pacific War. Korean War commanders used napalm against cave positions in similar terrain. Vietnam-era tactical manuals included variations of Boyington's split approach method for attacking fortified positions. Modern close air support doctrine still references the principle: adapt weapons to terrain rather than expecting terrain to accommodate weapons. Marine Corps aviation refined the delivery method over subsequent campaigns. By Iwo Jima, dedicated napalm bombers, modified B-25 Mitchells, could deliver 8 tanks per sortie compared to the Corsair's 2. Attack profiles standardized, suppress overwatch with strafing, deliver napalm in paired drops, confirm effect with reconnaissance before ground forces advanced. What Boyington improvised in 3 days became institutionalized doctrine within 3 months. Could any other weapon have achieved similar results? Post-war testing suggested alternatives. Rockets with incendiary warheads provided similar effects, but required direct hits, negating the tumble and spread advantage of dropped tanks. Flamethrower tanks, later developed for Okinawa, worked effectively, but only after ground forces reached cave entrances, accepting the casualties Boyington's method prevented. The combination of napalm's properties and the Corsair's performance created a unique capability no other weapon system matched in 1944. Gregory Boyington survived Peleliu, but not the war's next phase. Shot down over Rabaul in January 1945, he spent 20 months as a prisoner of war. Japanese captors knew they held a Medal of Honor recipient who'd killed their pilots and destroyed their positions. He survived through the same stubborn calculation that made him effective over Peleliu. Assess the situation, find the angle that works, execute without hesitation. Released in August 1945, he weighed 105 pounds and required 6 months to recover basic health. Lieutenant Chen returned to San Francisco after the war, his Corsair with 43 holes displayed in a Navy museum until 1968. He flew commercial aircraft for 26 years, never once discussing his Pacific War service with passengers. His Medal for Distinguished Service cited 15 confirmed cave destructions. Lieutenant Wilson stayed in the Marine Corps, became a tactics instructor at Quantico, and trained the pilots who flew over Korea. His lectures emphasized adaptation. The enemy learns, you must learn faster. He died in 1987, his funeral attended by 43 pilots he'd trained. Each one taught that doctrine exists to be improved when circumstances demand it. Major Ash commanded the 5th Marines through Okinawa, where napalm tactics saved his battalion during the Shuri Line assault. Post-war, he advocated for combined arms coordination, the principle that air and ground forces must adapt to each other's capabilities rather than operating independently. His post-war manual on infantry aviation cooperation became standard reading at Command and Staff College. Colonel Nakagawa never learned what defeated his defensive system. He committed suicide in late November when American forces finally overran his command bunker. Japanese records recovered after the war showed he believed conventional bombing and artillery had destroyed the caves. He never mentioned napalm in captured documents, suggesting either incomplete intelligence about how his positions fell or unwillingness to acknowledge an innovation that made his year of preparation irrelevant. September 12, 1944, above that first limestone ridge, Boyington spotted a pattern the planners missed. The caves connected. The same feature that made them deadly also made them vulnerable. Sometimes the solution to an impossible problem is recognizing that impossible only means no one's thought of the right approach yet.